Hello everybody. I know nobody is there yet. I also know we have lag. So if you are there and you're typing, I won't see it for a little minute. I wanted to jump on because I think it's important for us to come together. Hi Tanya! How are you? I think it's really important for us to come together right now and just, even if we just sit and check in and say hi. Hi Becky. Hi Sherry. And just come together. There's so many different things happening all over the world. I'm a bit sweaty this morning. I like heat, artificial heat from a heater, but then I kind of lose my compass on what's too much until I'm dying. Hi Kathy. Hi Caroline, or is it Carolyn? I think it's Caroline because of the INE, but I might be wrong about that. Hi Suzanne. My house is great. I just got my COVID results. I don't have COVID-19, but I did have to have a test because my husband is an essential worker, and because I was sick for a good few days, I was really crook, and it just hit me out of nowhere. And we've known it's not COVID, but the socially responsible thing to do is be tested. But I got my results this morning. The virus was not detected, which is what we knew, but now my husband can return to work. Hi Carrie. You did, Carrie. Carrie. Oh, I said curry, but I'm pronouncing Kari. Carrie. I'll drive myself mad doing that. Hi Tina. So I really want to try something. I've discovered that I can, there I am, I'm still in the picture, but I've discovered I can do stuff like I can put little questions and things like that in the live as well. So hopefully people don't mind bearing with me as I experiment. But I wanted to share just a couple of pointers and a little bit of information around a few things that we can do during lockdown, because I'm in Melbourne, Victoria, and we are in lockdown at the moment, which means a lot of things. Carrie. Hi Louise. But it basically means that there's no school, that there's no going out after 8 p.m. or before 5 a.m. unless you have a very good reason. It means a lot of things. Hi Kylie. Oh, I'm so glad. I could watch Ash all day cooking with her Thermomix. In fact, my 6-year-old often says, "Can we watch the cooking lady?" I find it fascinating watching other people cook, and exciting, but only if they're down to earth, real life people with children running around and normal things. Hi Ash. I was just talking about you. So yeah, I'm glad, Kylie. I was just talking about you, Ash, and saying how yeah, you did, you tuned in amazingly at the right time. Just saying how my 6-year-old loves watching you cooking with your Thermomix. Anyway, I'm going to get on with it. Let's see if this works. My 22-year-old daughter is calling me while I'm doing a live. Does this work is the question. I want to see whether that comes up in the live. Can anybody see an area on the screen where there is a question that says Does this work? Or is it not working? Oh yeah, okay, because I can't see it. But I can see when I open it all the responses underneath. How revolutionary. It's probably not revolutionary. I wonder if I can take someone's comment and do the same thing. Highlight it so people know what I'm answering. Hi Pam from Canada. Pam, I'm really jealous. Canada's beautiful. Okay, so I'll close that card. Has it disappeared now? Yeah, Suzanne, I think it's just so I can post a topic so people know what the hell I'm talking about, which is really handy for people with a brain like mine. Hi, Libby. Because I often go off on tangents or do a bit of web thinking. All right, here's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Did it work? Routine. Let's talk about routine. Ooh, what's happening there? Okay. Now I can actually highlight your responses. How important is it in your home, in your family home, to actually have a routine and stick to it? Hi Stephen, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It should say, you should be able to see something now that says routine. How important is it for you in your family home with your autistic children or your autistic selves to have routine and follow it? Because for some of us, routine does not work. So I'm interested to see. Okay, so look what I can do. Can everybody see what I've highlighted? Ash says, love routine, needs to be strict for myself and kids to cope, but it can also be the absolute enemy mentally and fatigue-wise. Yes, I absolutely agree. Can everybody see what Ashley has said? Is it showing up on the screen? I think I've got a bit of lag. Bummer. I'll just keep going. So let's talk about routine for a second. Yes, Kylie. Oh, me too, right? Me too. Yeah. I think this is really important for families to know. Out there in the big, wide world, when people talk about autism, there seems to be this handful of strategies or approaches that many people get caught up in believing are right for all people as long as the word autism is connected to them. Okay, you can't see Ashley's response. That's okay. Yeah. Oh, Kylie, that's great. Kylie says, I like rhythm, a flow that can be flexible depending on moods and sensory. Yes. Sarah says, useful at times but needs to be super flexible and adapt based on everyone's needs. Yes. My PDA child hates it, a demand at a particular time. Yeah. Jenny says, I try to get into routine, but I struggle. So you can see that there's a variation amongst our families around routine and how we do it and how important it is or isn't. Because a lot of people assume that if your child is autistic or you're autistic, you must have routine in order to survive. It's not true for everybody. I don't do routine. I don't. I mean, saying I don't do routine is probably silly, because in some capacity we all do routine. We go to bed at the same time, or around about the same time. We get up in the morning and we brush our teeth and have showers, some of us, and all of that. So that's routine. But when we're looking at having a visual schedule with every single part of our day planned out, even our free time, not everybody responds to that really well. So let's talk about routine in lockdown, or during a time right now with COVID-19 where things are changing. Thank you, Tanya. That's okay. I can return the call after I'm done, but thank you. People become really anxious and really upset about their children having a different routine, or their children not having a routine. We can create new routines if our children need routines. So a routine can consist of absolutely anything, and we can sit down with our children and be honest and say, you know, this is a really tricky time for everybody, even especially adults. Nobody really has any answers right now, so we're all doing the best we can to keep ourselves and others safe and healthy. And this conversation will change depending on how well it would go down with your child, and only you will know that. So some of our children might be too anxious to have a conversation about COVID. Some of them will need more information about COVID. So we have a conversation about why things are changing, because the autistic brain needs to know the why. And then we can create a new routine. Yes, see, Barbara, that's what I'm talking about. Barbara says, routines work for my child because he needs to know what to expect. It helps with his anxiety and the unknown. Yes. And that's where you would need to have a routine. So we create a new one. But when we create that routine, we keep in mind that it must be flexible. So we don't want it to be too tight, because at the moment what's happening is things change from day to day. You know, in Victoria we went into lockdown, and then things started to loosen up a bit, and now we've gone into hard lockdown. So if I had created a routine for one of my children that was tight and looked the same all the time, and then something happened with the changes with lockdown and we weren't able to do that anymore, that might make life more difficult for us, create more anxiety. So the routine doesn't have to be jam-packed. It doesn't have to have 7 things on it. It might only have 3 things on it. But we need to have conversations about that. If routines don't work for you, then you're probably not autistic. I'm totally joking. If routines don't work for you, then they don't work for you. And this goes back to what I was saying before about there being a handful of strategies that are delivered in professional development to allied health and educators about what to do with kids if they're autistic. We're all completely different. So if routine does not work, if having a visual schedule, if having a timetable is creating more stress in our families, we don't have to have them, or we can change them. And that routine needs to take into account the entire family. This isn't about a child going off to school during the day and having a school routine that works specifically for them and is child-centered. While we're at home, unable to leave our homes as much as we might have before, whatever we implement, whatever tools we're using, whatever we create to support our children must work for ourselves as well. Because I've already seen some comments in there about the stress that can arise from having routines or schedules that are feeling like they're too much, or they're overwhelming, or they're demanding. We can still have order, we can still have predictability, because the whole thing about routines is it creates predictability, familiarity. It reduces anxiety for some children. So if having a routine is not doing those things, then it's important to have a look at it, because if it's making more stress, if it's creating more stress, then it's counterproductive. Having a routine for children with an ADHD brain is to keep them on task, to keep them focused, to keep them on track. However, if there's demand avoidance arising from that and it's creating stress, then we need to look at that. The whole point of a routine is to reduce stress and to keep flow. It's supposed to be empowering and productive and helpful. For me as a mum, if I have something in our family life that makes me feel overwhelmed, stressed, like it's too rigid, I just can't do it. It has to go. We have to find something that works for the entire family. Sometimes when myself or my child get themselves into a routine, it can be an insight in what our bodies or brains might be asking for. That's so important, Kylie, isn't it? It's so important. And I love that, because that sounds to me like an organic routine. Organic flow, as we PDAs might call it. And that's not about having this structured visual on the wall, which is great for the families that it helps. But for me, that would be, no, too much. My routine changes from moment to moment, from day to day, from week to week. And like you said before, Kylie, it fluctuates with my anxiety or my physical or emotional capacity and well-being. It fluctuates with my environment and what's going on. Right now is the time to be extremely flexible with ourselves and our children, and gentle and compassionate and empathetic with ourselves and our children. So yes, having a look at our routine and knowing that it's okay to change it or create a new one. I know there's a lot of panic about remote schooling right now, remote learning. I don't share that panic. And I think I'm lucky to be able to say that because I'm a PDA. Here's the reality about remote learning. It's not the same as home educating. It's not the same as unschooling. It's not the same as going to school. When you have your own routine and you're an autistic person or you're not, and you're working or you're doing what you would normally do on a daily basis, and then you're being asked to incorporate schooling or structured curriculum in your own home on top of that on a daily basis and meet deadlines and meet standards of education and do assessments and to connect live. These are just some of the things inside of our family that I find that really unreasonable. I think it's fantastic to keep our children engaged with their learning in whatever capacity that is, and that will be different for every child. I think some children are unable, for whatever reason, to engage with learning at any given time, and that's okay too. But I don't think it's okay for us to put pressure on ourselves to do what our children's educators do. They are specialists in curriculum delivery in a classroom. So it's okay to go easy on ourselves and be gentle. We don't have to have a structured routine at home that we would have in a classroom. That's not realistic. It wouldn't be realistic for us as a family. So we're not meeting the remote learning expectations every day. We're not jumping online every day and engaging with learning. It'd be too much. There's no way we could get through that. and have time for our other children and their schooling needs, and for ourselves. Well-being is priority. That has to come first. Flexibility, second. So, the next thing that I want to talk about, now I've got to remember where I typed the last one. I can shut that, open this. Let's talk about supports. Thank you everyone for being so patient with me while I trial this little system that I just came across. Supports. That's going to change during COVID. If you have a child who's engaged with speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, psychology, if you are engaged with any kind of supports. For me personally, as an autistic person and a parent, I have a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and a psychotherapist, and a range of tools that I use in my everyday life to support myself so that I can be responsive to my life rather than reactive. Those things are going to change over COVID, but it's important to remember that for some of us, the option for telehealth is available. That means Zoom consultations, it means telephone appointments. For some of us, for me, talking over the telephone is something that is really difficult because I like to see a person's face. I know, crazy, right, being autistic and all. I like to see a person's face so that I can gauge their responses and their thinking. So telephone doesn't work for me. But there is the option to engage with online appointments, telephone appointments, and where I am, people are still able to engage with essential services. Essential services can be a cleaner coming to your home if that's one of your supports. It can be somebody delivering meals if that's what your supports are. So it's important to know the difference between having mates come over, which is not allowed, and Sarah, me too. It's so awkward on the phone, isn't it? And knowing what supports are actually considered essential services. Now, I'm only talking about Victoria, Melbourne, Victoria, which is where I am. I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world in terms of what's been put in place. But one of our things is if we are delivering care or receiving care, we are allowed to leave our homes. And that extends to people who are seeking support or delivering support. And that can look like a range of things as well. So it's important to look into whether your supports are something that you do not have to let go of at this time, or how we might adapt them or change them or be flexible with them. My children have just come outside. I can't wait for the sound you all get to hear. NDIS. Let's talk about NDIS for a sec. Is that still working? Is it coming up on the screen? There are a lot of people panicking about NDIS reviews at the moment. Now these, of course, are families who are managing remote learning, working. Many of us are also full-time carers. And, life. We're managing life. Having the time to prepare for an NDIS review, even when those things are not going on, is, full throttle. It's intense. It's overwhelming. It's scary. It's not a nice process. So here's what I want you to know. If you are due for an NDIS review at the moment, or your plan's about to run out, whilst the COVID lockdown and all those curfews and things like that are in place, the NDIS are actually allowing people to roll over their plans. So what that means is if you are happy with the plan that you currently have in place for your child, if you're happy with your funding, you can actually request that you have the same plan for the coming year. And all that takes is a phone call, an email. Hi Barbara, NDIS is the National Disability Insurance Scheme in Australia here. It's a funding scheme for disabled people. IEP, individualised or independent education plan, different. That's what I think you mean. That's a plan for education that the school and parents put together. Yeah. I did too for one of my girls, Jenny. So it's a funding plan, Barbara, that people have access to in Australia. It's only a few years old. And it's really wonderful and helpful for people that are being supported. But yeah, you don't have to send yourself into intense anxiety or overwhelm trying to get together everything you need for a review. At this time, you can call the NDIS and you can request to have the plan exactly the same for the coming year. And that's done for another 12 months. The next thing I wanted to talk about was this. As autistic families, whether you as the parent are autistic or not, when we're raising autistic children, we do differently. We do differently. We don't do typical. We don't do normal. And there's a really good reason for that, because we're not built for that. We require different supports, different tools, different strategies, different lifestyles, and that is okay. Children aren't identified as autistic so that they can go on in the world to somehow undo being autistic. Whatever supports that we have in place are wonderful, but during this time, it's okay to fall apart as well. I would be surprised if our children were not having a difficult time. And I know that there are a lot of families that are saying they've learnt a lot about their children's needs and their mental health during lockdown because they've noticed that their children have calmed down and their anxiety has significantly reduced. And that's wonderful. Many families have not experienced that. And I'm just going to touch on this really quickly. A lot of PDA, Pathological Demand Avoidance, or EDA, Extreme Demand Avoidance, a lot of families raising children with a PDA autistic profile have reported that whilst they thought not going to school or not engaging with everyday things would decrease their anxiety, they found that their children have become perhaps aggressive, maybe even presenting with new behaviours like violence. I want to explain that if I can. When you're a PDA autistic, at our core is this incredible determination and drive that we have no control over, an incredible drive for autonomy and freedom and choice, which means we're quite resistant to taking suggestions and help and being told what to do. Some of us not so much. Now, when there's a situation in our lives as children where we're told we can't do something, or we're told no, or we need to get around being controlled, we often have a safe person that we can go to negotiate with. So we can go to mum and say, I really want to do this thing. And we can negotiate and make our way through. Lockdown's different because even our safe person doesn't have the ability or the capacity to change things for us. So imagine that the powers that be have set out this huge demand and this control over everybody that they cannot do this set of things. And so as a PDA child or an autistic child, you can't go to your parent and negotiate going to your friend's house or going for a ride on your bike or going out after 8 p.m. So your world becomes that much more restricted and limited, and in our mind that absolutely sets off our threat response. For some of us, to the point of bringing us back to our primal state where we are punching out from the inside, and you will literally see aggressive or violent behaviour, and that is panic. It's important to remember that when PDA children are in that state, that's a panic attack. It doesn't matter what the behaviour looks like, it's a panic attack. It's anxiety, it's heightened, extreme anxiety. And I have got serious lag. I'm wondering if I'm even still connected. Kylie says, my 7-year-old has coined a saying for himself and me too. Normal is for normal people. I'm not going to get into the political correctness of his terminology regarding normal, as this is what he is using to communicate it's okay to do things differently. I love that. I think it's great. I used the word normal and typical before. I know they don't exist, but yeah. So knowing that we do differently and it's important and it's okay for our children to fall apart, allowing the process of anxiety around change and unfamiliarity and unpredictability, being gentle with ourselves, trying not to see ourselves through the eyes of others. I think one of the biggest problems that we come across as parents is when we make decisions or choices about our family life, when our family life is different, we often get into giving ourselves a hard time because we imagine what everybody else would think and say and do. And I can tell you now, comparison, there's no place for it in our family lives. Even between one autistic family and another, because we're all so different. It's okay to engage with trial and error during this time and to come up with things that work. Somebody posted something on my page the other day and I loved it. They fed their child something in a bowl in the bath while they went off out to the shed and had a game of darts with their husband, because their child was happy in the bath, eating their dinner in the bath out of a bowl. Mum and Dad went out, connected, spent some time together, had some fun, had a laugh. That's okay. I would think that's okay every day. Forget lockdown. That sounds cool to me. And, you know, yes, Kylie says, oh, so hard to do. It is hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. But I think it's so important, because when we accept, radically accept what we need and use trial and error to get there, that's when we find our peace and our flow and our joy. I love that saying too, Kylie, comparison is the thief of joy. It really is. Sarah says, we did that. Oh, the things we've done. Yep. And I love that we get to have a sense of humour about it and not feel like we're broken parents or we're failing our children or we're setting them up for failure. Some of the things that I've had to unlearn. It's very sad, really. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about, I know I'm talking a lot. I'm going to close that. I'm going to type in a new topic. Calming down. Oh, look at that. I've missed half the word. Wonder if I can edit that. Oh, I can't let that go. Sorry, everyone. Just can't be done. Calming down our threat response. How can we do that with our children? So, talking therapy is often counterproductive. If our children have a PDA profile of autism, talking therapy sometimes will feed the threat response and our anxiety. So how do we communicate directly to the part of the brain that scans our environment and decides what is safe and what is not safe, what is scary and what is not scary? Not by saying to our children, "You're amazing, you can do this." That's great to a certain point, but for a PDA, we need to bypass the conscious thought process and communicate directly with our brain, our neurobiology. And I talk about this a lot because it's so important. Human beings already do this. We already communicate directly to our brain and bypass our conscious thoughts. I see it all the time. We do that by listening to waves on a beach in a meditation. That's one way that we communicate safety to our brain. We do that by sniffing smells that we really love. I know some people love essential oils, so they'll put some on a hanky and just smell it. I'm getting right into it, aren't I? And smell it and feel calm. We communicate to our brain messages of safety with imagery, with sensory input, non-direct, indirect sensory input. So, particularly during lockdown, if our children are feeling anxious about not seeing their friends, not being able to leave the home, if they're feeling anxious about remote learning, what we can do is we can maybe source something on YouTube and have it playing in the background. Not say to our children, "Come and watch this," because that can be a demand and that can heighten anxiety. So we just incidentally have things around the home that communicate safety. So we might have footage of children engaging with remote learning and enjoying it. And when our children see that, they might feel less intimidated and less threatened by it. But that's not the only reason why our children may not be engaging with remote learning. So is this making sense? How we communicate safety and calm to our neurobiology? By bypassing direct messaging, sounds, smells, things that we can feel. But if there's a particular thing that's making us anxious, we create imagery for our brain to see and understand and hear so that it gets the message that it's safe. And it takes time, definitely takes time. An example for me is that I'm terrified of flying. Hate flying. I have got better at it though. When I jump on a plane and we're about to move into takeoff, the very worst part of the whole thing, I look around at other people and I look at what they're doing and I look at their faces and I see how stressed or not stressed they are. And because I can see their body language that they're relaxed and they're fine, even looking out the window, who does that on a plane, I feel safer. I just think, okay, I'm really stressed out about this, but it looks like I'm pretty much the only person that is stressed out about this. That doesn't mean I'm wrong or broken or bad. It means that I have a different threat response. That's what makes me autistic. It means that I have a heightened sensitivity to the world and everything in it. It means that everything's a big deal and nothing is simple. And that's okay. I like being that person. Because there are areas where it's really helpful and it really matters, where we need that sensitivity. But in those situations, paying attention to the things that communicate to my brain's safety is really good, really works for me. Does anyone have any questions? I'm kind of just monologuing here. If you have any questions, please put them in here. Joy says, someone I won't identify online has shared that he isn't able to recharge right now. We are seeing a lot of resistance of demands when he's usually thriving at this point in the summer. We're trying to leave lots of time to read, be alone, do hobbies, etc. Any more ideas to help bring peace and safety? Yeah, I'm not surprised by that, Joy. That sounds pretty standard because of the anxiety. Because the whole thing about lockdown is nobody has control over it. Nobody gets to say when it ends. We don't even have choice around it. So that anxiety will be looming no matter what we do, no matter how much downtime we have. We know that that's out there, and it's a really anxious time for some people. So I would suggest implementing sensory messaging of safety to the brain in whatever capacity that looks like. Lisa says, I've just bought a yoga gym ball. Oh, I love those. And running it over my kids' back bodies while they're laying on their bellies. Changing the pressure depending on which child and how they're feeling has been very calming and regulating for them. Best $12 I've spent. Lisa, that's my #1 stress relief. I'm not even kidding. I lay over the top of the ball, and I wish I could give the sensation of that release of endorphins to other people. I wish I could take it from my body and go, here, this is what I feel when I lay over the gym ball. It's instant calm. That deep pressure seeking. I love it. I love that you do that for your children. That's wonderful. Yeah. For me too. I even lay over it and I get my children to sit on my back, because then I get the pressure from the ball on my stomach and my chest, but then I have the deep pressure on my back from my little people sitting on me. I love it. So, so good. Okay. Yeah. I want to talk about flexibility and letting go. I've already touched on this a little bit. Some people will believe that now is the time for us to knuckle down on our autistic children, or they might get out of control and think that they can do whatever they want forever. And, yeah. Laura, great question, because this is what I want to talk about right now. Laura says, what to do if you can't get your child off screens all day? So screens is something that comes up a lot, and what I feel and what I say about screens probably won't be the same as what parents have already been told by other professionals. As an autistic person and a mother of 4 autistic children, married to an autistic man who's still a gamer, who was still playing his game at 3 p.m. this morning, screens are so important. Here's what I know about our house. If we're feeling anxious, a screen might be the first thing we grab for. And there's a whole range of really good reasons for that. The first one is that a screen is regulating and calming and soothing. The second one is that it might be the only thing in a person's life that they're able to exercise control over, particularly right now with what's going on in the world. The third thing is that for some of us, our social network is on the other end of a screen. Our ability to access connection and community and support is on the other end of a screen. Fourth, sometimes the importance of us being able to zone out and not have to think means incorporating a screen, playing a game. And autistic people never stop thinking, and that can be painful sometimes. Sometimes we just need reprieve from the constant processing. There has to be a part of our day where we get to process. There has to be. And for some of us, a screen is the only time we can do that. Having downtime is great, but allowing our children to engage with the very thing that regulates them is really important. There's a lot of messaging out in the media that screens are terrible and they're changing our children's brains and they're addictive. I think sometimes what we do is we focus on predominant behaviours and we make a lot of assumptions about the behaviours. This is what autistic people know because we read the information that's written about us based on our behaviour. And we know that a lot of it's actually inaccurate. So we're used to seeing scientists and people looking at the behaviour of children and making assumptions about what it means and what it indicates. Screens for autistic people created those things. Our brains are made for them. However, I don't want to dismiss that some children don't do well with too much screen time, but I want to delve a little bit deeper on that. Some families will say, when we take the screen away from our child, they're really aggressive. Now, is that because the screen is creating the aggression, or is it because they're having taken away from them something that is regulating, calming, soothing, their social networks on there, they're able to zone out? I think it's important to know the difference between the two. And I think also, whenever especially if our children have a PDA autistic profile, wherever there are restrictions, limitations, rules, they are demands, and our brain responds to them as threats. So if there's even the thought that the screen is going to be taken away from us, then the threat response is to panic and to need the screen with a sense of desperation. It works the same with anything. If I so much as think about going on a diet, I'll eat Ben & Jerry's for dinner, breakfast, lunch and dinner for the next 3 months, even though I don't want it. Threat response goes into overdrive and thinks it needs to compensate before something's taken away. So we'll fixate on it, that screen, that's all we want all of the time, because the threat that it's going to be taken away is there. So yeah, I think it's important before we ask ourselves, how do we take our children away from the screen, is to ask why they're on the screen so much. And at the moment, I think it's absolutely reasonable and to be expected that our children will be grasping for something that helps them to feel regulated, safe, calm, zoned out and connected. And I even said to a mum this morning in a session, I feel so grateful as a 42-year-old woman, 41-year-old woman, I don't know why I just said 42, that my social connections and social network are online, because it doesn't matter what happens and when, I have access to it all the time. So it's really important to think about screens in that capacity as well. So that's a really good example of what I wanted to talk about, being flexible and allowing things that ordinarily would look different. This is a different time. These are different circumstances. Our children are going to have reactions to what's going on. We are going to have reactions to what's going on. Our anxiety is going to increase. Our panic, our overwhelm, we're taking on a hell of a lot more in our parent roles at the moment than we normally would. So it's to be expected. It's important to create space, to hold space for ourselves, to know that if we're not doing as well as we normally do, that's a perfectly rational and reasonable response. Perfectly acceptable. So being flexible is so, so important right now. And the last thing that I wanted to say is this. If you are in a position of privilege right now, and you can, it's important to help others. People get confused about what privilege is, though. It doesn't mean we have a lot of money or a flash car. It doesn't mean we have a big house, or it's not about what you have. It's about how you live and the freedoms that you have. So for myself, even though, we have our own stuff going on at home, I have autistic children, I am autistic, I work, we've got remote schooling, all of that stuff going on, I'm still privileged. I'm still in a position where I have another adult in my home who can pick up where I leave off. I still am in a situation where if I have spare time during the day, I can call somebody and see how they're going. So reaching out to others might just be sending a text message and saying, hey, I've got a couple of hours today. Do you want to have a chat? Can I offer any practical support? It might be knowing that somebody's unable to get out of the house to get groceries, so ordering them to be delivered, or picking them up and dropping them off. That's providing care, and we're allowed to do that. It might be knowing that somebody can't afford groceries and just buying them and getting them delivered. We don't have to tell them. You don't have to announce when we support people. But it can change somebody's whole day. Because when we implement those small acts of kindness, I think it has a long-lasting impact on people, that they know that they are supported and that there is love and kindness in the world. And that's a really important message right now for people to have. We don't have to spend money to support people either. It can just be about touching base. It can be about knowing, making people know that you're available if they need you. It can be about giving our children more of our presence. It can be whatever it needs to be. Does anyone have any questions before I finish up? I've just basically done a webinar, but I think it's important for us to come together and chat and to hold space for each other. And I'm really grateful for everybody being here, but I'm sick of the sound of my own voice. I was a long time ago. I've definitely got lag. Or I'm completely gone. Maybe I've been talking to myself for the last 15 minutes. Oh, thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. I've definitely got lag, so I'll just hang around for another couple of minutes to make sure I haven't missed anyone's questions. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Thanks everyone for being here. Sending so much love to everyone. Reach out in email or... Oh, thank you, Penny. Yes, I should have mentioned that and I didn't. On top of the telehealth, Penny's just I'm getting a truckload of comments now. Penny's just posted in the comment section, that was a ball, a link to some additional resources to support mental health for people right now. Just reading all the comments, sorry for my silence. Oh, great. Great. Thanks, Penny. Oh, Amy. Thank you. Thank you for telling me that. And please send lots of love to that gorgeous 11-year-old and to all of yourselves. You're all doing amazing. We're all just doing the best we can. Sending lots of love. Oh, now how do I get out of this? Okay. End live video. Bye everyone.